So, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Serene-risc team for accepting my paper and also to congratulate them for this very innovative workshop in such challenging times and this very innovative format. And I am a PhD, my name is Sofia Geraldes, and I am a PhD candidate at ISCTE in Lisbon, Portugal. And I'm working on how the EU and NATO are approaching for again online disinformation. And I'm using security governance analytical framework to this analysis. Today, I'm bringing a paper on understanding the approach of Canada towards online disinformation, and I'm using the proposed model by Hellman and Vaxen. They propose a model identifying four modes of approaching online disinformation through confronting, blocking, naturalizing, or ignoring. I choose Canada not only for this workshop, but also because I found Canada a very interesting case within NATO environment because it's one of the countries, I think maybe one of the very few or the only country which within its NATO association of Canada has a center dedicated for disinformation studies. So I found that very interesting, and that's why I brought Canada for today's session. So today I'm bringing 6 main topics, and I will first introduce how this relationship between cyberspace and security emerged. Then I will go to a brief understanding of the definition of disinformation in general as a two-dimensional phenomenon, and how disinformation is promoted so easily nowadays because of an assemblage of technological, economic, social, and political factors. Then I'll go to the model. I'll briefly introduce the model that I propose to analyze Canada. And then I will apply the model to Canada to check if Canada is a confronter, blocker, neutralizer, or ignorer following this model proposed by these authors. And I will finish my presentation with some final considerations. So starting off with this relationship between cyberspace and security, cyberspace was not always considered a security problem, at least in the political sense. Cyberspace insecurities were at the beginning seen as a technical problem. The concept of cybersecurity was introduced by computer scientists that were interested in analyzing and overcoming insecurities related with external unauthorized intrusions in computers and safeguarding the data and etc. But the growing dependency of our societies to cyberspace, to do almost every activity on our daily lives, made the security justified in some way the securitization of cyberspace. And there were 2 core drivers that made the securitization possible. One is technical, which is related to the fact that many critical infrastructures that we depend on our daily basis, for instance, energy, communications, transports, depend on cyberspace to work. So if a cyber attack, if some of those systems are attacked, this can compromise energy, communications, and so on. And this social dimension, which is our dependency in our daily lives, we depend on cyberspace for almost anything. And this social dependency creates a sense of vulnerability, and malicious and hostile actors can explore these vulnerabilities in hostile or simple malicious way. And these vulnerabilities and this dependency of cyberspace and desecuritization of cyberspace in political matters, lead to the development of cybersecurity policies. And the cybersecurity debate has emerged in three core discourses: the cybercrime, the cyberterrorism, and the cyber war discourse. Nevertheless, this difference between these three main discourses, the definition of cyber, one important issue is shared in these three discourses, which is the definition of cyberspace. And in the traditional sense, cyberspace has three main layers: the physical, the logical, and the social layer. And the physical layer is related to cables, to satellites, computers, etc. And the logical layer is related to, for instance, algorithms. And the social layer is human. And despite many times the social layer, namely the human, is considered the weakest link, the social layer is almost many times marginalized, because it's very difficult to patch social resilience, to be resilient to disinformation, to extreme discourse, hatred, discourse, etc. So the first gap that I want to introduce here is social. Even though the social layer of cyberspace has been marginalized, is one, if almost, is the most important layer. And we need to also patch this social layer. And one of the important challenges that's been affecting the social layer is online disinformation. And I'm interested on bringing this idea of the mind as also a critical infrastructure that needs to be protected. Now I'm falling on to disinformation. And I understand disinformation. So disinformation, it's not a new phenomenon. Nevertheless, its definition, its antiquity doesn't translate it in a shared definition. And I'm bringing today this idea of disinformation as a two-dimensional phenomenon, as a genre, which is the most analyzed dimension of disinformation, and it is the one that I'm going to focus on today. And as a genre, disinformation is a type of information that it can be false or manipulated and is created with the intention to deceive. And even though there is no shared definition on disinformation in this sense, there are three main shared characteristics, which are low infectivity, which means that the disinformation content has a spectrum of false information, meaning that the information shared can be completely false, can be part correct, which are the main resilient disinformation, the most shared, meaning that, for instance, some kind of disinformation which the core information is correct, but it's out of context, for instance. And the second aspect of disinformation is that it mimics the format of traditional media, the title, the format, the entire format of a traditional news media, in order to gain legitimacy, to be more trustworthy, more resilient, more shareable. And it's also intentional. It's created with intention to deceive. And it's created with intention to deceive for political reasons, which I'm going to focus on today. For political reasons, it's mainly to generate chaos or to denigrate political opponents, etc. It can be intentional. It can have political intention for Reagan to affect foreign adversaries, or it can also be internal in terms of political motivations. But it can also be promoted for economic reasons, because, as we will check next in the next slide, the social media platforms algorithm promote this idea that the more shareable, the more revenues. So it can be also the format of this information, the scandal formats, makes people more wanted to click and to open, which then reflects in revenue. So people are also sharing these kinds of information, this type of information, to get money. And we also have disinformation as a label, as a political device, instrumentalized by political actors and using contemporary political struggles in order to delegitimize political opponents or the media, which we are seeing several countries around the world. So, moving on, the problem of online disinformation. So, online disinformation, the definition of disinformation and the phenomenon of disinformation, it's not new. And also the use of technology, it's not new. Also, the same happened with the print press. But today, the problem is that the technological evolution enables an easier, cheaper, and effective way to produce and disseminate massively content. So this content will reach almost globally and instantly. And this is the main problem. And the resilience of this information nowadays is justified or explained not only by these technical features, but also the business models of social media, but it is also, and I put economic incentive, it's related with the business model of social media platforms. But on one hand, the resilience of this information nowadays, it's related with the technical features of social media. For instance, this exploration of trend mechanism by malicious actors, which means they use the algorithm-driven platforms to create trends, and these trends became shareable. They also use this network character of social media platforms, which the network means that it's shared among like-minded people or friends, and the narrative becomes more resilient and trustworthy and is more shareable. Also the use of bots, meaning that a certain kind of narrative is very many times repeated and creates a sense of a widespread acceptance of a certain narrative, and the absence of filters, which meaning that there is no contradiction to a certain narrative. And this is all technical feature of social media platforms that makes online disinformation more resilient and shareable. And also the business model, as I already mentioned, that which means that the more trendy certain narrative, the more revenue the author of that narrative can get from it. But it's also important to look at the political environment and audiences in this non-online sphere of disinformation, meaning that also the political environment has to do with the resilience and success of disinformation. In most polarized societies, disinformation has more success. Moving on with the model proposed by Hellman and Waxen. So they propose four modes of approaching disinformation. And I will start by confronting. Confronting is an outward-looking strategy, and the main focus of this strategy is to actively produce and project counter-narratives towards a certain given direct adversary. So it's directly outwards. And it's an hostile and antagonistic strategy which can contradict in certain ways democratic values. Another outward-looking strategy is naturalizing. Different from confronting, it does not confront, but it produces and projects narratives to external audiences to promote its narrative. It's more open and transparent. It even though as confronting is an outward-looking strategy, the purpose is not to confront, but to project its own narrative without confronting necessarily. There is no need to have a certain third party. And we have also blocking, is an inward-looking approach. And the main goal is to protect the national narrative by blocking other types of narratives, namely external adversary types. And this kind of strategy is more a symptom of non-democratic authoritarian regimes. And also we have another inward-looking strategy, which is ignoring. Contrary to blocking, it doesn't block adversary narratives, it just defends its own narrative. It ignores there is other, but it defends its own narrative based on the reinforcement of civil society and building trust on democratic institutions. So, moving on to what is Canada doing to confront online disinformation. First of all, for Canada, is online disinformation and online disinformation in particular an issue? Yes, it is. And I can define two main moments in Canada approach to online disinformation. I think at the beginning, before the 2019 last year general elections, Canada was more of in discourse and approach and of an ignore, meaning that this information was perceived as a threat to democracy and social cohesion, mainly in relation to the formation of public opinion. And the main strategy was focused on digital citizen initiatives, so in funding projects to build citizen resilience and to build a kind of sense of awareness towards these kind of strategies, and to equip citizens to critically assess online disinformation. Nevertheless, with the 2019, so last year, general election, there was kind of a move from this ignore discourse to a more confronted discourse. I couldn't directly find identify kind of adversary, but the tone in the discourse towards this disinformation as a threat was more in a strategic. In disinformation was a threat, not on, as a threat to democratic institutions, but this was seen as a security problem. So there was an upgrade. So disinformation was seen as a threat to democracy and to security. And there are four main pillars that Canada addressed to protect democracy, and which are based on innocent citizen preparedness. So this is ignore approach, meaning that the main goal is to engage, the best defense is an engage and inform public. And there are three main approaches through critical election incident public protocol, digital citizen initiative, and get cyber safe. Another pillar is improving organization readiness, and this is also a symptom of a more tougher approach of Canada towards online disinformation, from ignorer to a more confronter, more clear identification of this foreign interference and the need to counteract this foreign interference. This need to counteract this foreign interference as a threat to Canada's security. And then we have the clear combating foreign interference and a more securitized move. And we also have this need to work with social media platforms. And the social media platforms are seen in two ways. One, as important space to promote an healthy democracy, as an important space to promote a debate and dialogue, but also as a threat, as a medium to disinformation, to create confusion and exploit existing social tension. So there is a need to work with social media platforms through this common understanding about their responsibilities to build an online democratic space. So I would say that Canada's discourse has evolved from an ignorer to where online disinformation was seen as a threat to democracy, to social cohesion, namely to the formation of public opinion, to a more confronting, seeing the online disinformation as a problem, as a threat to democracy, and ultimately as a threat to security. So therefore, I would say that we notice a broadening of the security concept from we had in the past environment, economic, and I will say this is a symptom to broader to also political systems as being and the need to be securitized, and the approach as being mostly ignored, focus on reinforce the civil society, but also as a confronter, namely, as I mentioned here, through combating foreign interference, and also by improving this organization readiness, where there is this need to detect and respond to foreign interference. And thank you.